Well, God bless you all. My name is Dan Gallagher, and I'm with Allegiance to the King. And Allegiance to the King is all about building a community of those faithful to the King, Jesus Christ. You can see at the bottom of this slide, I've got a2kchurch.org. That's our website, and that's where you can find us. We've also got a Facebook page. And I want to encourage you, we have a lot of resources. There are classes, and if you go to our website, you can see who we are, what we're about. You can take a look at the various classes. We've got a foundational class taught by my friend John Pruitt. We've also got videos, and one of the things that we excel at is online fellowship. So if you're out there and you're seeking fellowship with other Christians who are trying to be faithful to the King Jesus Christ, then this is probably going to be a good home for you. So I want to encourage you to check out our website. I am going to do a teaching on a topic that I got to be frank with. You got to be careful when you teach on this because it's pretty easy to get pulled into a dark web, and you'll see what I mean by that. Okay, so one of the questions I have for everybody tonight that I want you to think about is the greatest commandment, which we know, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength. That's Deuteronomy 6:5. And it was first spoken by Moses, affirmed by Joshua, and reiterated again by Jesus. So if this is the greatest commandment, then logic would tell us that it's the most important commandment, then not loving God would be the greatest sin. That's what I'm going to propose. And sin is the sin of idolatry. It's the worship or giving glory, honor, respect to anyone or anything in place of God. So what is my question tonight, and what this teaching is on, is what is at the heart of idolatry? What causes people to turn and go from God and to put anything else above him? And possibly you can think of people in your life that you know that have done that. I do. And there are times that I've even done it myself where I've turned from God and decided that I wanted to do something my way rather than God's way. Idolatry is to follow your own desires. And as I said, it's to turn from God and to look for anything else as the source of what drives you. And am going to propose that what drives idolatry is pride. So in this teaching, we're going to look at what is pride. Now, the problem that we run into in English is pride is actually a homonym. You know, when we read the Bible, it's very clear that God condemns pride. Yet pride in the English language in most cultures, pride can mean having a sense of personal dignity. In other words, he's like, I've got some pictures here where people would say, take more pride in your appearance. Well, if we just generalize and say all pride is bad, that's not necessarily true. If we're meaning that it's you should have more self-respect for, be groomed properly, and the individual wearing the uniform can be proud of the uniform and what that represents. Another meaning of the English word pride is to take satisfaction in an achievement. It's admiration, appreciation, and it's respect. So it's not necessarily wrong. It's not idolatry to say, I'm very proud of my son who has made a major accomplishment. He's gone to college, or he's done this, or he's done that. This type of pride in this meaning is kind of neutral. It depends on what I'm admiring and what I'm appreciating and what I'm giving great respect to. Even in First Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 12, I'm going to grab my Bible here for a second, because just this morning I came across this verse, and it was this use of pride, which was translated in the NIV. It could be translated differently in other versions, but it says, "We are not trying to commend ourselves to you again, but we are giving you an opportunity to take pride in us so that you can answer those who take pride in what is seen rather than what is in the heart." So even Paul is using pride there in the sense of, so you can take pride in us, so you can have admiration of us or great respect for us. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And again, in this sense, it is kind of neutral. It depends on what the pride is being applied to. Um, this second use of pride, as I said, is even found in a positive sense in the Bible, and it's the Greek word kakaume, and it can be also translated as to boast or to rejoice. So in Romans chapter 5, verse 1, it says, therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him, we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice. It's a word which is translated in the sense of boasting or like being prideful in a good way, in hope of the glory of God. In 1 Corinthians 1:31, it is also translated as boasts and boasting in the Lord. And 2 Corinthians 9:2, for I know your readiness, of which I boast about you. So my point is that this is the second type of pride. It's one where you have admiration and great respect. That's not the kind of pride that God condemns. The third sense of pride is to have an inflated sense of self, a sense of haughtiness, arrogance, conceit, a high opinion of yourself. And this type of pride, pride when used in this way, is always about self, and it's always negative. In From what I can see, unless someone can correct me on this, which I'm always stand to be corrected. But for instance, the gentleman here in the picture, he's making himself king, or I've been around people where every time I'm around them, I hear of their accomplishments and they're boasting about themselves. Boasting in and of itself is not necessarily bad, as Paul was boasting and boasting of the gospel and etc. But boasting when used in this way is what God is condemning, and it's a self promotion. This type of pride, as I said, from what I can see, is always negative in God's opinion. It's always bad. It's unattractive, and it is a relationship killer. I threw some pictures up here on this slide. The gentleman who's got his face tattooed. Well, I got to tell you, we're running into more and more of this stuff, and I'm certainly not one to condemn tattoos as I've got them myself. But it's hard to believe that a person that tattoos their face isn't looking for some kind of recognition. It's not that kind of thing that you can avoid seeing, and it's always I from what I've run into, it's about look at me. In the same way with the bodybuilder, it's a self-absorption, a self-focus. And again, the girl down at the bottom crowning herself as queen. This type of pride that God condemns, as I said, self-absorption, self-focus, self-centered, self-promotion, self-righteousness. In other words, I'm right, you're wrong. It's that person who always is elevating themselves. It's also a hubris. It's an excessive confidence in self. And this is the kind of pride that I like to say is that it's like a black hole. When you're around this kind of pride, it seems to suffocate others because it sucks all the air out of the room. There's no room for anyone else. You can draw a line, in my opinion, from sin back to pride. I think there's two root causes, maybe more, but I've seen two root causes of sin: unbelief and pride. Pride is behind lust. I want more, whatever that may be. It's behind theft. I want what you have, and even though I have no right to it. It's behind adultery. I want physically what's not mine and what I have no right to. Malice. I want to hurt you because. See, I is always at the center of pride. Unforgiveness. I want to hold on to something against another even when I shouldn't. And so the line that can be drawn from sin is the line of I that goes back to pride. Proverbs 13:13 says, where there is strife, there is pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. My point in pointing these verses out is God's clear. Pride is what's behind strife. Here in Proverbs 14 through 3, a fool's mouth lashes out with pride, but the lips of the wise protect him. The sins of the mouth, gossip, slander, it's pride that generally is behind that. Psalm 73, 6 through 9. Therefore, pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. Here's pride is behind violence. From their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance, they threaten oppression. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. You just hear the pride dripping in that. So there's many faces to pride. And these are a few that I just started randomly writing down. Pride causes me to assume the worst of others. I'm guilty of that. I'm sure we've all done that at one time or another. Rather than think the best always of another, something goes wrong, many times I immediately jump to the worst conclusion I can take. Pride makes me cynical, sarcastic, criticizing, treats others with contempt. Pride causes me not to see myself clearly. Pride causes me to focus on the sin of others while I excuse my own. Pride makes me unwilling to seek forgiveness or extend it to others. Pride causes me to think I am entitled. Boy, we see that in society a lot. Pride makes me insensitive, uncaring, hard-hearted to the needs of others. Pride allows me to justify myself and my actions. It causes me to control and manipulate others. Pride is always about getting my way. It causes me to compare myself with others. It causes me to be a bad listener and want to talk over others and to want to get the last word. I got to tell you, I'm guilty of that. I interrupt people. My wife has busted me on it. I've actually said to my friends, I don't want to be like that. And if I interrupt you, please raise your hand and say, wait. And it's a visual signal, so I don't know if you've ever struggled with that, but I certainly have. Pride makes me value what I say more than what other people say. It causes me to try to impress others and to prove myself. Actually, the thought hit me while I was putting this teaching together. Wow, I really want to do a good job so that, and all of a sudden I go, whoa, wait a minute. I want to do a good job just so I can bless other people, so that we can discover the pride in myself and in others. I don't want to do a good job. So look at me, what a great teaching. Or, pride is so insidious. It slides its way right underneath the door and under the carpet. And before you know it, it's right in your face. Pride causes me to put me before my ministry. It makes me think I'm exempt and I deserve exceptions. It causes me to overestimate myself and underestimate others. It makes me pity myself and be hard toward others. Years ago, I was doing a teaching. It was being recorded. We were presenting a class. I had to do 5 takes because I kept messing up. Finally, I go over. I'm sitting down and I'm just beating myself up. My good friend came over to me and he said, "You know what, bro?" He said, "Self pity is really ugly." Wham! Just knocked me right across the side of the head. I was like, "What am I doing? I'm sitting here in self pity." It was prideful. Pride causes me to be unteachable, to avoid correction, to be envious of others. Pride also causes me to isolate from others, and pride, worst of all, blinds and deceives me. And this list goes on and on. Pride, if you think this doesn't apply to you, then rewind, rethink, and play this teaching from the beginning back, because we all suffer from pride. And if you don't see any pride in your own heart, then it's clearly because Obadiah 1:3 says the pride of your heart has deceived you. See, that's why pride is so insidious. Pride is the one sin that we're blind to in ourselves. If I lie, I know I've lied. If I steal, I know I've stolen. If I do other sinful things, I know. I know if I drink too much. I know if I talk too much. I know when I gossip. But pride blinds me. Even a small child will be, we all know, we see small children, mine, mine, mine. I think pride is in the heart of all of us. And we come from the womb predisposed to pride. A good friend of mine, Mike Patton, years ago said, I is in the middle of pride. He broke it down, PR standing for personal reputation. There's a sense of pride of who am I and my reputation's at stake. And a devalued estimation. I'm no good. I'm going to take pity on myself. See, both extremes are prideful positions. Pride prevents us from seeing ourselves and others clearly, either inflated or deflated. Here's a couple quotes I came across. Pride inclines you to see pride in others and overlook it in yourself. And that was by Samuel Johnson. I love this next one. There is perhaps no one of our natural passions so hard to subdue as pride. Beat it down, stifle it, mortify it as much as one pleases. It's still alive. Even if I could conceive that I had completely overcome it, I should probably be proud of my humility. Benjamin Franklin. And it reminds me of a time, true story. I was at a conference with 5,000 people in the audience, Christian leaders from all over the world. A gentleman got up, he was doing a presentation, and he had just finished a book that he had written. And he said, I think this is the best book on humility that's ever been written. If you don't see the irony in that, I'm sorry. But, for a guy to stand up and he was being prideful about the book he wrote on humility. So part 2 in this teaching, the fact is, I've tried to establish that we all deal with pride. I'm sure some of these things have resonated for you. So where does pride come from? What's the source of our pride? I believe pride is in the heart of God's archenemy. Ezekiel 28:11 through 19. And I can only go into a brief touch on this briefly, but there's a full-blown many teachings that can be developed from this. But in Ezekiel 28:11 through 19, we've got some insight into God's enemy. And here Ezekiel is recording, he says, you are anointed as a guardian cherub. Speaking of Lucifer, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mount of God, and I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. I made a spectacle of you before kings. Here, God is giving us some insight into the sin of his guardian cherub, Lucifer, also known as Satan, and other terms that we've applied to him. Isaiah 14:3 says, you said in your heart, now listen to all the I's that are in this. I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Just look at the pride that was in Lucifer's heart that's still there. Pride lives in the heart of all mankind. And I believe the reason is because Adam disobeyed. And when he did, he took on part of the nature of his new ruler, Satan. In Genesis 3:1, and this is a very short breakdown on this, it says that the serpent was more crafty than all of the other creatures. The word crafty is the Hebrew word arum, and it's a homonym. It's also translated as naked. Arum in Hebrew can mean naked and it can mean crafty. When it says that Adam and Eve were in the garden and they were naked, they were arum. When it says the serpent was more crafty, it's the word arum. In Genesis 3:10, after Adam and Eve have sinned, God calls out to him, and Adam answers, and he says, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, because I was a room. I think he was naked. He recognized he was naked, but he also recognized he was a room. He was crafty. Man became crafty. You can go through and see the breakdown of how he even answers God and the deflection. But man became a room, not just naked, but a room, crafty. He took on the very nature of Satan. And the pride in us causes us, like Adam, to resist God, to live contrary to the ways of God, and to do evil. And that's why I believe we see all of the evil in the world today through mankind. Proverbs 16:5 says, "The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished." Detest is a really strong word for God to be, he detests. And what is it that he detests? The proud of heart. It's also translated detest as an abomination or disgusting. Proverbs 16:8 says, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." Proverbs 8:13, "To fear the Lord is to hate evil." I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior, and perverse speech. And Psalm 10:4, "In his pride the wicked man does not seek him. In all his thoughts there is no room for God." Why is there no room for God? Because all the man's thoughts are about himself. So Psalms 40 verse 4, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, who does not look to the proud, to those who turn aside to false gods." As I said, I believe that pride is something we all struggle with. It's something we all have to conquer. We all have to root it out as much as possible. So, what are some practical ways that we can do that? I mean, what good is it to recognize that we have pride and that God hates pride if we don't have some practical ways of dealing with this? So here's a few things that I've come up with, and I would love feedback and I would love to come up with more. But practical ways to root out pride. Number one, you have got to practice humility. Humility is the opposite of pride. Pride is always about self. So we have to counter that self assertion by putting others first. You have to train yourself to put others first. What do I mean? Let others go ahead in line. Maybe you got there first, but just let someone else go ahead in line. Simple things. Hold doors open for other people. That's just elevating another person above yourself. Always wait for others. I I got so many stories that I could go on, but I was traveling with a fellow minister one time. We were had been overseas, and we were all tired, and we're in line waiting to get on, and it was very difficult. There are lots of people and passengers, and as soon as that gate opened to the ticket agent, up there for the airplane, he shot ahead about 50 people, cut in line, and jumped on. I just couldn't believe it. And we got, myself and a few other people, we got on the airplane, and he's sitting in the seat, completely got his shoes off. He's got little blinders on so he doesn't have to see. It was the most prideful, self-promoting, self-asserting thing I've ever seen. And yet this is a guy who was proclaiming to be this great minister. Practice waiting for others. Practice putting other people first. Practice helping those in need. Look for need around you. I know this is a big one for me. Be a better listener. Quit worrying about what I have to say and focus more on what the other person is saying. Don't interrupt. Don't cut others off. Don't argue just to make your point. Guilty again. Let go of having the last word. I've got a close relative. Doesn't matter what you say, they've always got to have the last word. It's pride. Never take the last piece of anything. Another person that I worked with for years, didn't matter if there were 50 people around and everybody wanted cookies. If there was one cookie left, he made sure he took it, and I busted him on it. And he said, "You know what? Why don't you offer it to others first?" A guy checked into a room one time with a person, we were traveling, and they had put a very nice basket of condiments and stuff from the local area. He looked over, this one individual, different person, looks over and picked it up and said, "Boy, my wife sure would like this. Can I have yours?" Because she I looked at him, I said, "I think my wife would like it too." but but it caused me to be prideful because I'm kind of like, no, my wife, and it's just so insidious. It just pops up so quickly. Live as if you have nothing to prove. I think that's a great admonition. I don't have anything to prove and no one to impress. And there are many times that I have been about impressing people. Make it a practice to never brag or boast. Let your acts of kindness go without notice. That's a big one. If you're going to do something, just do it. It always reminds me of let our reward be in heaven, and let your praise be on the lips of another and not yourself. And as Jesus, when he's coming into the thing, don't take the seat of honor as he's busting the Pharisees. Take the low seat, and then if someone's going to promote you, let them promote you, but don't promote yourself. Another practical way to root out pride, and I think this is very, very, very important, and it speaks really part of to my heart and allegiance to the King and what we're trying to do with fellowship is you have to cultivate close and godly relationships. See, because the nature of pride is I don't see it in myself. And so I need people around me that are gonna say, Dan, that seemed to be prideful. And you go, really? And we enter into a dialogue and talk about it. Something you need to do is look at the wake of behind you. Do you have a lot of friends? Do you have a lot of relationships? Are you isolated and alone? Where are you at in life? Because pride is a relationship killer. And if you're living with a lot of pride, you're going to find that the wake behind you is going to show nothing but broken relationships because I don't want to be around someone who's always prideful, putting themselves first. Pride deceives and blinds us, as Obadiah 1:3 said. So, to further on this, make it a habit to seek out the feedback of others, determined to drop defensive behaviors. If someone comes and confronts you, don't make it your first habit to have to defend yourself. Seek to understand. Seek to say, why is this person saying and doing this? Eliminate denial, deflection, and counterattacks. Other opinions are not always right, but at least listen to them and then evaluate them honestly. So, in conclusion, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, the bad kind of pride, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. James 4:1. But he gives us more grace. That is why the scripture says, God opposes the proud, but gives favor, grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, before the Lord, and he will lift you up. You will not need to lift yourself up. So, again, in closing, check out our website at a2kchurch.org. You can find this teaching and many others like it recorded there. And I encourage you to consider, to look seriously at your own life and to see where is there prideful behaviors in my life and what do I need to root it out. God bless you. Well, we're back to the gallery, and this part of our fellowship meeting is where we take feedback, and we're still being recorded here for a little bit. So I just want to encourage if anybody out there, and please let me say this. Don't throw any adulation about my teaching because you're going to cause me to get prideful. So, no. What was your experience? Is there anything in your life that resonated for you that you can take home in this? Suzanne.
It's interesting you made that comment because there's this false humility and that, like we tend to like, oh, don't praise me, don't say anything nice about me. I'm just this humble person. And sometimes it's pride that prevents us from accepting compliments,
Absolutely.
right? And I remember one person talked to me once about how somebody in my last church was talking about how they were really broke, he and his wife, and it was really, really hard for them to accept gifts of money from people. They were in need, and it was a pride thing. They didn't want to people knew that they needed money, but they just didn't want to take money from people, even if the person really wanted to help them out. And one thing that he mentioned, he said, was he had to realize that that not only was that a pride, to be too proud to take a gift, but that he was denying the other person the joy and the privilege of being able to give. And maybe that person also felt moved by God to give. And so, in a way, his pride would be rejecting God's favor, God's gift. So, pride works in these different nuanced ways. So it's so interesting. I totally related. Like all the things you raised your hand on, those were mine too. But I think that's something to think about too, is that we shouldn't be so proud as to not allow people to, give us gifts. I mean, I know people, like my husband is like this too. Like he never wants anybody to compliment him. If somebody says to him, wow, you played saxophone so great, he's like, no, I didn't. And it's not that he has this, prideful self, deprecation. He's just afraid of feeling any pride at all. Like he doesn't want to be proud of what he's doing because he doesn't want to take the credit for his gift. But I think we have to have a balance. I think we need a balance between being really proudful and boastful and thinking we're all that. But at the same time, we do need to acknowledge like God has given us these beautiful gifts. And if people compliment us and thank us for our generosity or for blessing somebody by some music they're playing or whatever it is, we can say thank you. We don't have to like act all, whatever. So that's just like the opposite side that I think that's helpful to be aware of. I really, really loved all this, Dan. And also you tapped into the idea of practicing doing things. I was reading that the verse where Jesus says, practice giving. And it's like, because of our sinful nature, to counteract this sinful nature, to be prideful or to be selfish or whatever it is, we have to counteract it with practice. And that means sometimes we don't even like doing it. We don't want to give the last cookie to the other person, or we don't want to be the last person in line and let somebody go ahead of us. So we have to make ourselves do it. We have to practice it. And it might not be fun, but then it gets us into this habit of like putting other people first or thinking of other people ahead of ourselves. So that whole concept of practicing is very entrenched in scripture. God said to the Israelites through Moses, teach your kids from the minute you wake up until the minute you go to bed, and put it on your doorpost and write it on your head and stick it on your clothes or whatever. It's like you have to like get into these habits of practicing things for them to really have transformational power. And so I love that you brought that out, and appreciate this is a lesson we should revisit at least once a month.
Well, I can relate to what you say, because there was a situation where a gentleman once tried to. I'm the kind of person likes to do it myself. I'd rather just, and I'll just go do it because I know it'll be done right. Well, that can be kind of prideful too, because I'm not taking someone along and I'm not letting them learn. But in one situation, a gentleman was trying to help me out financially, and I kept saying no. And finally, he looked at me and said, "You know what, Dan? You're denying me the blessing."
Mm.
I whoa, and it was, and I learned that. So now when I go to do things for people and they do that, that's my mind. Don't deny me the blessing, bro. you know. So, but yeah, that's great. Thanks, Suzanne. Anyone else got anything to add, or where it resonated for you? Well, I'm dealing with
Dan, oh, never mind.
yeah, Phyllis.
You really, you said it. But one thing that I was thinking about is don't keep count, keep, you know what I mean? I've done this and I've tried to do this well, just stop keeping count. I know when the Lord was talking, he would say when, people like, and he said, you've already received your reward, if that's how it's going to be. So just you don't have to keep count of everything.
That's good. John?
I was just being kind of silly over here. I told John that what you're talking about makes me think of that cartoon Chippendale. You remember Chippendale? The two chipmunks, and
Yeah.
nobody will go into, I don't know, into the burrow or through the door or whatever. Just they're both going, no, 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 you first. No, I insist. No, I insist. You first.
That's cute.
Dan, I think that the pride, you talked about this, but it's just so true that pride blinds you to itself so that you don't even know that you're sinning. And to me, that's just the worst. But for two reasons. One, because you don't know, and two, because it's really a bad sin, right? It's really bad. It's not, we're not talking about, you just messed up a little bit. No, pride is really, really bad. And it's really the initial rebellion of Adam and Eve, right? The I want to be on the same level as God. I want to be God because I am, I believe that I should be, or something along those lines, right? And so it's just so hard. I think that it's a good prayer to regularly pray for the Lord to reveal to you pride in your life, in your heart. I have definitely experienced that in my life where the Lord showed me pride that I was not aware of. And, for folks that care about that kind of thing, it's sickening when you discover that about yourself. But I really feel like that's part of the reason why the Lord gave us the Holy Spirit in the first place, was to help us clean up our act so that the word would live in us. And so I think it's just a really good idea. Just continually be praying, for the Lord to reveal that kind of stuff to you, because you're just almost certainly not going to know that you have it.
Well, and as you were talking, I was thinking about how don't ever be so prideful to think that you've overcome pride. You will never overcome it 100%. It's part of our broken, corrupted nature. So that's why you have to practice all those things, and why we need people in our lives to be able to, so Samuel.
Yeah. Yeah, I had some different things that came through my mind now with people sharing. It's hard because sometimes I don't know what to share and what not to, but that's another thing. I think it's an interesting point that you made about how being around other people can help you deal with your pride, because they can call it out. But I think there's also, maybe in a sense, an unintentional way that being around others can help deal with your pride. Because like you mentioned, pride is centered focus. You're focusing on you. Um, but when you get around people who have so much less than what you have, people who are less fortunate than you start to realize the blind spot of pride. Of like, I've been thinking about what I don't have. This brother of mine does struggles to make ends meet. I'm more favored in that sense than them. It's interesting because that last passage that you mentioned about God, he opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That for me is the one verse that perfectly summarizes Old Testament fasting. Fasting is a way to humble yourself in order to seek God's favor. And so that's why whenever they were in a crisis like Esther and things like that, they fasted. It was a way to humble themselves so they can seek God's favor. And God responded to that. But the interesting thing is that in Isaiah, God addresses the religious leaders and he says, you guys fast, but you're able to fast and still have a spirit of pride, an attitude of pride. You're able to abstain from the food, but that's not really what I care about, because you abstain from the food, but you don't really humble yourself. What I want you to do is to stop taking advantage of the weak and the unjust, and to share your food with those that don't have. And so that I call my attention about it mentions about sharing bread with the poor and the needy, about how that would be something that would truly humble you to see those that don't have what you have. And so that's another way that being around other people can really fight against your pride. So just one thought that I wanted to share.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Uh, John Truitt again.
Uh, you might have mentioned this. I don't know, but I maybe I missed it. But something that Samuel was making me think about is that sometimes the pride isn't necessarily in ourself and our maybe skills or whatever, but rather is associate something that we're associated with.
Mm.
And in some ways, like you pointed out, I'm really proud of my son for this or that, for his accomplishment or something, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you think about racism, for instance, is a pride in association with your race or whatever, could be other kinds of things, ethnicities or whatever. And so you're associated with this thing, and you have pride in that in a negative sense, where it's elevating you above others.
Yeah, you think you're better than other people.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I think you can have doctrinal pride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, we have been in ministries where we've had ministry pride. We think we're better than everyone else because we got the truth, or we got this, or and it's still pride, and it's kind of, so there's individual pride, and then there's corporate or collective pride, which I think is what you were talking about, John. But yeah, so it's just insidious. It's out there. I mean, as Samuel was talking, I realized, I was thinking back, it's like there are a lot of times that I'm around someone who, we used to call them bums and hobos, but now they're the unhomed, or however, wokeism we want to use. But I mean, there's times that I'll be around some people like that, and I look down on them, and it's like, go get a job, quit standing on the corner. And I know that some of these people are genuinely need help, but a lot of people genuinely don't need help. And they leave the corner begging and walk around the corner, change their clothes, and hop in their BMW and drive home. And so it's hard for me a lot of times, and I find myself looking down on them, and it's just like, that's no different than going into the temple and saying, well, thank God I'm not like that guy.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I think we can stop the recording here. So I'm going to, once again, find us at Allegiance to the King on Facebook and a2kchurch.org. And God bless you. And I hope you've enjoyed this. And if you like to, you'll find us. This fellowship is on Wednesday nights, 6:30 Central, is it? Yep, 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, and 5:30 Mountain Time. So in the United States, at least it is. So I'm going to stop the recording. God bless you all.